Strong up. Born to be great. Well. Every ghetto youth born to be great. Well.
Thank you for joining us. I'm here today with Francesco De Simone and Oliver Hill. These are the producers of the documentary film Born to be Great. The film is about the Citizen Security and Justice Program, the IDB's crime prevention program that has been running for 20 years. Francesco, I'm going to start with you. You're the executive producer of the film.
Thank you, Jim.
How did you become involved first with the CSJP program?
So when I arrived to Jamaica in 2018, I didn't really have this program on the radar very much. You know, I had been told that it was about to close, and my understanding was that that I had to accompany it towards closing. Sure enough, as soon as I arrived, this was just only about maybe a couple of weeks of my being in Jamaica. The project execution team took me to visit one of the communities in St. Catherine near Spanish Town, and it was for me a almost life-changing experience. You know, I got to see what the team was working on. I got to meet some of the incredibly committed people that were working on this program, both on the justice side and also on the violence prevention side. And I got to meet the violence interrupters, people that I knew very little about at the time, and I was incredibly impressed. The work, the level of commitment, the dedication. We knew the project was closing in December of 2020, and we really wanted to go out with a bang. We wanted to make sure that the hundreds of people that have worked on this project, you know, the members of the Project Execution Unit, people from the Ministry of National Security, dozens of volunteers and workers from the local organizations, that they got the visibility that they deserve for all the work that has been done. And of course the beneficiaries, which ultimately are the main target of the documentary. You know, we're talking about tens of thousands of people that have benefited from this program over the almost 20 years. But I have to say that in addition to the visibility, I think the documentary also ended up playing a slightly different role, which is fit into a discussion that there has been nationally in Jamaica regarding the impact of social interventions.
How do you think that CSJP fits within that debate?
There have been people out there that have said, well, because we cannot demonstrate that these interventions are impacting the homicide rate, which ultimately is the main indicator of crime and violence, then they're not particularly useful. We certainly disagree with that. We know that the impact at the individual level has been there. About half of the people who entered the case management system, which is the main, the core activity of the program, and that were evaluated to be high or medium risk, had their level of risk go down during the life of the project.
What have we learned?
Let's start first with the more technical one. Is, you know, the final evaluation of the program has found that the methodology, the structure of the program were right on target, and so that's important news, because it means that the program was well designed and that we were going in the right direction. The activities, the way they've been articulated, were right on track. On the other hand, talking about a more general level, I think one of our takeaways from this project is that to generate change in at-risk communities is difficult, that it takes time and it takes very little to undo that progress, but that people who live in these communities are committed and they do want that change. And so it's up to the government and its partners to work with a whole of government approach, which is a sometimes abused expression. It's everybody together pointing in the same direction and coordinating all institutions, which is of course difficult.
Of course. So I guess that brings us to what's the legacy of the project? Where is this taking us to?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the most interesting and important things that has happened over the past couple of years is that the Jamaican government has approved the Citizen Security Plan, which is a comprehensive plan to address crime and violence in the country. And if you open that document, you will see that there is a lot of CSJP in it. And for us, that's the most important indication that indeed the government has learned from the project and that a lot of the activities will be replicated and will continue on through the generations. I also wanted to mention that the Ministry of Justice, in my view, which obviously led the justice component of the project, did a terrific job at incorporating the CSJP activities in their work stream in a way that was almost seamless and very natural, such that now they that the project has ended, they are sort of continuing all of those activities.
What were some of those activities? What were for you the most important of those justice component activities?
The activity that is represented in the documentary, the legal assistance, I think it's a terrific one. You think about these peoples in the communities facing sometimes enormous odds dealing with the legal system in Jamaica, and now there's a glimmer of hope in these little buses that drive through the communities and provide free advice. I think that's life-changing for people.
Well, congratulations on bringing everything to a close and on being able to transition some of those activities to the government. It's a lot of hard work for a lot of people. How did you become involved with the CSJP program and with the making of the film?
It was a film that really caught my interest because as somebody who's made Jamaica his home for the past decade or so, the approach of trying to address the epidemic of crime and violence in a holistic way was quite novel, and it's certainly that the government itself has struggled with. So for international partners, you had the IDB, you had the government of Canada, you had the government of the UK, all coming together and trying to address this problem in a holistic way. I think the big challenge for a lot of Jamaicans is that they don't have the structure from the time they're born to lead successful and fulfilling lives. And that's because the family unit isn't always there. They don't always have the support of a mother and a father in their home. And then, they're dealing with just everyday problems that you have to deal with when you're living hand to mouth. And you don't have the space to think about, what do I want to make of myself and how best can I apply myself to be a productive member of society.
Was this the first time that you were able to see these issues up close? You say you lived here for about a decade. You've lived in Jamaica for a decade. Was this the first time that you have been involved in a social program like this one that allowed you to be able to interrogate some of these challenges?
Definitely. I've lived a very privileged life in Jamaica. I wear the hat of a travel author, so I get to see the most beautiful sides of Jamaica. And for this project, I really got to see some of the ugliest sides, unfortunately. And by ugly, I mean poverty. I mean dilapidated housing. I mean poor access to basic services like water and electricity. Things that a lot of us take for granted and really need to be addressed in a holistic way. It's not just the government's responsibility, it's also people's responsibility. It's also the private sector giving these people a chance at employment.
Yeah.
So certainly it was eye-opening, as much as I've spent time in Jamaica to try to tackle these issues, really up close.
I'd be interested in learning from you as the director and the producer, what you learned personally from the experiences that the beneficiaries had with the program.
Really what I learned is that a lot of these young people just need somebody to believe in them and to support them. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes that bit of caring and that bit of financial support to give them the push. And the truth is, once they have that, a lot of these people will excel. And nobody really wants to become a criminal. nobody wants to be a murderer. Nobody wants to be a gunman. How many gunmen out there are rich or, are living the life that they would envision for themselves?
What is common between the superstars that we see in sports and music in the country and these stories is really a level of conviction that you can elevate yourself, and you start hearing the story of the kind of odds that these people have had to overcome, and you can't help but think, in the right conditions, they really can excel. So that was also eye-opening.
So I'm hearing optimism, and what I would like to know is whether we feel that with the adoption of some of the activities of the program now transitioned into the government, whether we feel that there is a sense of optimism, a sense of hope that we will get to a whole of government approach, the kind of approach that we've been creeping towards program after program, whether we feel that, yes, there is a sense of optimism that this is going to happen.
I'm certainly optimistic. Obviously, the events of the past couple of years have perhaps increased the challenge. But my job is in the area of institutions building, and it's by default a long-term process. And I think you need to realize that all of these things, including the reduction of crime and violence, need to be looked at on a lifetime scale, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I think if you look at the numbers and at the trends, there are reasons for optimism. We, the donors, the development community, certainly are committed to stand by the government. Of course, there's still a long way to go. I think what is interesting about the current push under the Citizen Security Plan is really this idea that the 50 communities that were the target of CSJP, that's not really sufficient. You need to think of something that you can scale up at the national level.
This program started out focusing on, I think, 8 communities, and then it was quickly expanded to 50 across 8 parishes. But there's at least 700 communities that desperately need this kind of help across Jamaica. It would be unfair to say, this program hasn't been successful because the homicide rate hasn't come down. This was just really piloting these kind of activities to see what worked, to see what could be improved. And I'm really encouraged by, the fact that the Minister of National Security, Horace Chang, recognizes that and saw the benefits that did accrue to individuals, to communities, and said, okay, I'm going to take what works, and he says this in the film, I'm going to take what works, and we're going to replicate this in a new direction. So that's encouraging. In Spanish we say the last thing you lose is hope, and we can't lose hope. I think the private sector here has this motto of making Jamaica the preferred place to live, work, and raise families. I have, realized that for myself and my family, and I think, a lot of people who have the opportunity to do so would choose Jamaica. But for the crime and violence problem, I think more people would want to live here, more people would want to invest here, and certainly, a lot of people vacation here, and fortunately they're not very much impacted by these problems. But Jamaica has a lot going for it, and these problems shouldn't be too difficult for us to overcome together. And you talk about a whole of government approach, but I insist it's not just governments. You can't just blame the government or rely on the government to fix these problems. We all have to play a part, whether it's as individuals helping employ somebody, whether it's the private sector giving somebody a chance, even though he may have been imprisoned. Like I said, people just really need somebody to take a chance on them, and then they need somebody to hold the bar up, and people will rise to that bar.
Great parting words. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to encourage you to watch the film, Born to be Great. It is a wonderful, heartwarming, very transparent look into the lives of 12 beneficiaries of the Citizen Security and Justice Program.
Tell them man born for be great. Up on the road, man gone.